Please welcome Southwest Regional Director, Dr. Benjamin Tuggle.
Well, good morning. Very pleased to be here today. I would like to also give my kudos to my colleague, sometimes Tom Melius, who shamelessly promoted the Midwest region. I also started my career here. But it had nothing to do with Tom Melius. How do you perpetuate the legacy of a conservation hero? With a depth of knowledge, passion, and dignity. That's Buddy Huffaker, who has been the executive director of the Aldo Leopold Foundation for the past 12 years. The foundation was established by the 5 children of Aldo Leopold to steward the original family farm, which sits along the Wisconsin River outside of Baraboo, just a few miles from here. The foundation also curates the vast Leopold archives and serves as the executor of the Leopold legacy for the literary estate. Buddy has made the foundation a leader in advancing the conservation movement by using Aldo Leopold's vision of the land ethic to inform and inspire individuals, communities, and organizations. Under his leadership, the foundation completed Green Fire, a full-length film which documents the life and legacy of Aldo Leopold. It's already been shown in 40 states and 10 countries around the world. You will get a chance to see that film on Wednesday. With a background in landscape architecture, Buddy has always been a leader in terms of green building. And he has tried very much to make the green building movement closer to the conservation movement. He was deeply involved in every aspect of the construction of the Aldo Leopold Legacy Center, which is the Green Building Council's highest LEED new construction building in the world. As we reacquainted ourselves behind the green curtain back there, he reminded me that we first met when I was in Chicago. I was a bit younger and he was a bit younger. And it's nice to be able to reconnect with him. So, without further ado, I'd like you to welcome to the stage Buddy Huffaker.
Well, Ben is much too generous. He didn't remember me at all, nor should he have. I was a freshly minted, opportunistic graduate student looking for work, and he was leading the Chicago Wilderness Movement. And needless to say, I didn't get any of the jobs that I applied for there. Not that Ben made the decision. But I don't hold a grudge. It's okay. It all worked out pretty well, probably both for Chicago Wilderness and for me. Just want to say a few thanks. In particular, I think to Dan Ash, Greg Sakanik, and the planning committee to select Madison as the venue for your visioning conference and thinking about what the refuge system will be in the next 100 years. It is kind of fitting that Leopold, was born almost 125 years ago. So when we think about a life and its impact, it is not too soon to begin thinking about what the next century holds for us and for the refuge system. I do have to say, though, that I'm pretty disappointed to be here with you today, or at least welcoming you. You see, Nina Leopold Bradley had wanted to do this herself. But unfortunately, we lost her on May 25th at the age of 93. In her stead, it has fallen to me to welcome you to Leopold country. It's an honor, personally, because I have spent time at refuges from Ding Darling in Florida to Cape Mere in Oregon and many in between. At the Leopold Foundation, we work with the National Conservation Training Center to ensure our shared heritage remains one of America's great traditions. And we work closely with Fish and Wildlife Service staff here in Wisconsin, not only at our flagship refuges, but also in the Leopold Wetland Management District and the statewide Partners for Fish and Wildlife Office. We affectionately refer to this part of the world as Leopold Country. But Leopold Country is as much a state of mind as it is a geographic place. It is a state of mind that is embodied in the mission of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where all things natural, wild, and free are recognized, respected, and valued. Aldo Leopold was in fact asked to serve as the agency's first director, but he ultimately decided that he could have a bigger impact from outside by working with his friend and colleague, Ding Darling, who ultimately took the position. This gathering is a reflection of this continued public-private partnership that shapes, protects, and advances the National Wildlife Refuge System, providing both science and advocacy. Yes, advocacy, not in the strict sense of lobbying as we see it going on so frequently today, but rather in the sense that ensures the voice that is necessary for the continuation of spaces and places critical to the human endeavor. Places that provide all of the economic, ecological, and emotional returns that are possible where and when land is healthy. In the late 1930s and 40s, in the face of the Dust Bowl and World War II, Leopold was desperately concerned with how to protect and restore healthy land, what he called land health, where he described, or as he described, the capacity of the land for self-renewal. The only way he could envision achieving this critically important but immensely difficult goal was through a sweeping change in people's relationship to the land, a land ethic. Leopold wrote, "The land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, and animals, or collectively, the land." He believed that a land ethic would, quote, reflect the existence of an ecological conscience, which in turn reflects a conviction of individual responsibility to the health of the land. He also went on to provide us the ingredients necessary for developing a land ethic, or an ecological conscience, when he wrote, "We can be ethical only in relation to something we can see, feel, understand, love, or otherwise have faith in." Once again, we can be ethical only in relation to something we can see, feel, understand, love, or otherwise have faith in. Think of how the refuge system provides so many examples of places to see, feel, and understand the natural world and build our love and faith in natural systems and the natural world. But when Leopold turns to supplying a recipe, he gives us only the most fundamental equation. Conservation, he writes, means harmony between men and land. When land does well for its owner, and the owner does well by his land, when both end up better by reason of their partnership, we have conservation. When one or the other grows poor, we do not. I love this line for so many reasons, and I think it's appropriate here in this setting. It speaks to and affirms the need for the Fish and Wildlife Service to have programs like the Partners for Fish and Wildlife that provide private landowners with an opportunity to grow and express their own ecological conscience. But it also speaks to our public lands, our refuges, where we as a people get to work together to do well by our land, and in turn, let the land work on us. In these special places, we have functioning ecosystems with all of the cogs and wheels, so that we can accrue the benefits of clean air and water, community development through ecotourism. But perhaps most important, though hardest to quantify, are the emotional and spiritual values that wild places provide in our individual physical and mental health and our collective psyche. What distinguishes Leopold's vision is that he saw the ultimate goal, the prerequisite even for conservation, lies in people. Rather than conservation approaches where people are only viewed as the problem, Leopold saw the human capacity for love and compassion not only toward each other, but toward the land as part of the solution. The power of human compassion has been impressed upon me since Nina Leopold Bradley's death. I've received cards, notes, and even poems from all over the world by people who have been touched by her vision, her grace, and her commitment to a land ethic. It has been amazing to be part of the healing process as others struggle to envision a world without her ongoing love and affection. This experience has made me particularly sensitive to the importance of having conservation heroes and heroines that inspire us to protect all things natural, wild, and free. I'm here in front of you today because of Nina. Nearly 16 years ago, she saw something, apparently something Ben and his colleagues didn't see in me, and that she felt there was something there worth investing in and nurturing with the sense, surely tested at times, that I might have the ability to advance her father's vision into the future. I'd feel especially honored except for the fact that she was able to see this in and nurture this in so many other people as well. She supported and inspired fellows, interns, visiting researchers, foreign dignitaries, and local school children, all with the same respect and enthusiasm. Because I know some of the composition in this room, it is my guess that many of you have had someone special like this in your life as well. Perhaps it was a mother or father, grandparent, aunt or uncle, professor or friend that took your own raw passion and interest in the natural world and helped form it and guide it into a commitment to conservation. Perhaps that individual is even here in the room today. Maybe it's Denny Holland, Greg Sakanik, Jim Kurth, Jamie Clark, Lynn Greenwald, or up next, the Honorable Sylvia Earle. Or maybe they aren't here. Maybe like Molly Beattie, Sam Hamilton, Art Hawkins, or Nina Leopold Bradley, they have moved into what Leopold described in his Marshland Elegy, to some far pasture in the Milky Way. Now, Kurt Miney, Aldo Leopold's biographer, whom you will hear from later today, has a policy of not answering any question beginning with, what would Aldo do, or what would Aldo do about? In part, that is because we cannot know exactly what Aldo would do or think about a world nearly 65 years later, with the advent of genetic engineering, the internet, and perhaps of most importance to this room, robo-ducks. But more importantly, it is the wrong question. The question in front of us is not what would Aldo do, as provocative as that question is, but rather, what will we do? What will we do having had the benefit and wisdom and insights of Aldo Leopold, Ding Darling, Rachel Carson, Olaus and Marty Murray, Gaylord Nelson, Stuart Udall, and so many others? Who will be our next generation of champions, and where will they come from? What kind of educational background will they have? What color will their skin be? Will they hunt and fish? Heck, will they even eat meat? We will not be able to answer all of these questions this week, but the fact that these social questions are part of the discussion, alongside the more traditional questions regarding the science of ecological management, such as the role of disturbance in modified ecosystems, when and how to deploy resources against invasive species, and how ecological systems and communities will respond to climate change. The addition of these social questions reinforces the dramatic impact Leopold has had on our conservation thinking. Now, lest we all walk away at the end of this week disappointed after searching for answers to all of these questions, I leave you with one of Leopold's most profound observations. He wrote, "In our attempt to make conservation easy, we have made it trivial." It is not easy, and it is not trivial. It is profound, and thus warrants the time, energy, expertise, experience, and even those moments of exasperation of those present in this room, and by extension, everyone you represent. Now, fortunately, as part of the Green Fire filming process, we were able to capture Nina in the filming of the larger effort. So we can hear and experience her vibrant smile and passion for the land with a short video. But do come tomorrow night to see the full film, to see more of Nina and the work that you all carry on. Thank you all for what you do to advance a land ethic, and once again, welcome to Leopold Country.
It is interesting to think that the land ethic didn't happen just all of a sudden. The land ethic is a result of much thinking and evaluating and understanding the interrelationships of the natural system. I think it took him a lifetime to really understand how interrelated we are with the natural system. I remember Dad at dinner one evening said that he had bought some land up in the sand counties, and it was corn stubble and cockleburs as far as you could see. And of course, it was a matter of increments that we fixed up the old shack. Then we, of course, restoring the landscape was the major problem. But Dad didn't explain this all to us, that this is what he had in mind. I think one of Dad's most important things in terms of his family was he not only taught us how to restore the land, but he mostly taught us how to enjoy it. The whole first half of Sand County Almanac is just examples of the delights of understanding even a little bit of the natural system. Aldo Leopold's legacy is that man needs to live in harmony with the land.